Hello students, this is Dr. Hank again. We are starting a new unit on ecology of tropical rainforests. And again, this comes as two separate lectures, part 1 and part 2. With part 1, we are going to be focusing on what is a rainforest. We are going to a rainforest, so we'd better know what is a rainforest. And also then we'll focus on physicochemical and biological characteristics of a rainforest. With part 2, we will focus on biological interactions, competition, predation, mutualism, and parasitism. And we will discuss a bunch of examples, including some rainforest examples. Okay, so first of all, what is a rainforest? So let's start with this map of global biomes. So biomes are large tract of land with very specific plant communities. And in this case, the driver is the regional climate. So the regional climate determines the plant communities, and eventually the plant communities will determine the animal communities and all the other organisms. So as you can see, there are so many different biomes on our planet Earth. And one of those biomes is tropical rainforests. So there's some rainforest in Central America, some in South America, Africa, and also in Asia, and some parts of Australia. And again, if you remember correct, all these tropical rainforests are located in the tropical belt for a good reason. So again, the biomes are large-scale terrestrial communities, and they are typically shaped by the climatic conditions in that environment. And when we are categorizing biomes, we use dominant plant forms. And we are using plant forms because plants do respond to climatic changes directly, uh, and also they are good indicators of disturbances. And the plant communities determine the habitats, and the habitats will determine the animal communities. And again, so tropical rainforest is one of the major biomes in the world. So typically, the distribution of biomes is determined by Earth's climatic zones. And when we are talking about climatic zones, we focus on several major physicochemical factors, including altitude, ocean currents, temperature, and precipitation. And if you just focus on temperature and precipitation, uh, just those two factors can precisely predict the distribution of biomes. So the most important two elements of making a biome is temperature and precipitation. So when we are actually describing a biome, we use these graphs, and these are climate diagrams. In a typical climate diagram, so the x-axis is the time or the month, and there's two y-axes. The left y-axis is the temperature, and the right y-axis is the precipitation. So as I mentioned before, the temperature and precipitation by itself can precisely describe a biome. Now we are going to actually compare and contrast two different biomes. So we are going to Amazon, so that's tropical rainforest, and right now we are living in US, mainly in Virginia. It's a temperate forest. So let's compare these. So what are the major differences of climate between tropical forests and temperate forests? Let's take a 30-second and let's come up with a list. Okay, so when you are comparing a tropical rainforest with a temperate forest, the first thing that you realize is the temperature. The temperature is very hot and it doesn't change. So the temperature is pretty high compared to the temperate forests, and there's no any seasonal variation. Same story applies for the precipitation. The numbers are very high compared to a temperate forest, and you you will actually get rain throughout the year. In temperate forests, you can see a distinct winter, and you actually experience all four seasons in Virginia, right? So during the summertime, we'll receive more rain and the temperature will increase, and eventually, once we hit fall, the things will drop, and eventually we'll experience some sub-freezing conditions, which is depicted by this blue area during the winter time, mainly in January and February. So these are like two different worlds. So once you go to the tropics, the first thing that you will realize is it's hot, humid, and rainy. So the mean annual temperature is about 75 Fahrenheit. And also, as we have seen in that graph, the precipitation levels are pretty high, no distinct seasonal changes, but in some parts you could experience a distinct high rain season. And these habitats are highly productive because of the energy coming from the sun. So they'll receive a lot of energy for a given area compared to a temperate region, and because of that, you can see high biomass. And also, the habitat is mainly dominated by broad-leaved evergreen and deciduous trees. And this picture actually shows you it's just green and lush and packed. So we all know that the landmass wise, all the tropical rainforests represents a very small area, but it harbors most of the species in the world. So one of the reasons is, this is the most important reason, the primary productivity. And we discussed that the primary productivity is very high in tropical belt compared to other areas, because that area receives lots of direct sunlight throughout the year. That's lots of energy. So when there's more energy, you can make more biomass. And in this graph, we are comparing the net productivity between several biomes. So tropical rainforests have the highest compared to deserts, temperate grasslands, tropical savanna, and several other habitats. So this primary productivity is the driver for this very unique biome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the physicochemical and biological characteristics of a rainforest. What makes a rainforest rainforest? Okay, so I'm repeating things again. So one of the major features is year-round high rainfall. So typically it's more than 2000 millimeters. And also, again, year-round high temperatures, typically around 75, and there's no any seasonal variation. There's no significant seasonal variation, right? And we realize that rainforests are lush and dense. Because of that, the inside of a rainforest is very shady and dark. So plants are always in a continuous battle to receive uh, the sunlight available, the very limited sunlight available. And also, although these ecosystems are highly productive, and most of the nutrients are restricted to a very thin upper layer. So in this cross section, you can see it's just few centimeters. All the leaf litter and all the nutrients are restricted to this very superficial layer. Why? Because the high year-round rainfall leaches everything, all the nutrients into very deep areas, so you really don't have access to that nutrient. So in a rainforest, all the nutrients are typically above ground. Okay, so let's focus a little bit more on biological characteristics. So in a rainforest, you see big, tall trees. It's really easy to find a bunch of trees more than 30 meters tall. And typically these trees combines their crowns together to create a thick canopy. And also you'll see these emergent trees here and there. So in this picture you can see a continuous canopy, but at the same time you'll see some trees emerging from the canopy, and these emergent trees are the tallest. And if you think about the mid and understory, they are composed of many trees, including palm trees. Let's have a look of the cross section. Okay, so in this illustration, we can see that rainforests are full of trees and other vegetation. And here you can see that canopy layer is created by interconnected crowns of most of the trees. But once a while you will see these very tall emergent trees emerging from the canopy. And palm trees are one of the unique characteristics in your tropical rainforests. So you will definitely see a bunch of palm trees. And the understory is very thick, so it's packed. So if you want to walk in an undisturbed forest, it's going to be very challenging. So you have to actually make a little path. You have to remove trees, you have to cut down little these bushes and make a path. And another really unique biological character is epiphytes. Epiphytes are plants that grow on top of other plants, and most of the rainforest trees are completely covered with these epiphytes. And another really cool life form, a plant form, is lianas. These are vine-like plants, and they typically use other trees to get the support. So basically they make a network of these vines all over the rainforest. So this is a real cross-section of a rainforest, and it's really hard to get this cross-sectional view because everything's dense. Once a while you can actually get this view if you are traveling on a boat. So in this picture, I think we are going to be actually getting this view when we are traveling. So this area represents the canopy. Everything's connected. Mid and understory, it's very dense and it's dark. And also you can see few palm trees here and there and few emergent trees. These are emerging from the canopy layer. And if you look very carefully, you can see these vine-like plants making a network all over the canopy and in understory. But did you guys see the jaguar? Do you see it? Do you see this green arrow? It's right here. So there's a jaguar waiting maybe to hunt a caiman or something. Isn't it pretty cool? Maybe we'll get the same look. Who knows? Okay, so typically if you think about the structure of the trees in a rainforest, they have straight trunks and they typically branch at the canopy, making umbrella-like structures. And these umbrella-like canopies then connect to each other and create a continuous canopy. And the other end, the plant's roots are mainly on the surface, because if you think about all the nutrients, they are available on the surface. Because of the heavy rains, everything leached down to very deep layers, so you really don't have access to that nutrients. So plants tend to actually spread their roots superficially. So since we are talking about roots, let's talk about some unique adaptations of roots. So we will actually see two very unique roots, buttressed roots, and these are typically large wedge-shaped roots supporting large trees. And also they have these surface extensions, so they can actually absorb all the superficial nutrients. Another adaptation is prop or stilt roots, and typically you find these in trees, mainly in palm trees, uh, in flooding areas, and this will actually add additional support to the plant. And then leaf adaptations. So typically rainforest plants or trees have broad-leaved evergreen leaves. That is because if it is broad, you can absorb all the limited sunlight, right? And at the same time, they have thick waxy leaves, so that will actually add some durability. These are evergreen plants and evergreen leaves, so they don't shed these. They use it for several seasons, and it will add additional strength. And also the wax layers act as resistant layers to parasites. And also, as you can see in this plant, they have very pointy tips, and we call them drip tips. That is because it allows the leaf to drain all the water very effectively. If it keeps like a thin film of water on the leaf, that's not good. That can actually attract lots of epiphytes and parasites, things like lichens. So that will reduce the lifespan of the leaf. So drip tips actually help them to drain well and extend their lifespan. Another really cool thing in neotropics is cauliflowery. Basically, that's growth of flowers and fruits on tree trunks. Have you ever seen such a thing in temperate zone? So I have some examples here. This is cocoa tree, and I'm pretty sure that we are going to be actually seeing this. We use cocoa pods to make chocolate. And this is the cannonball tree, and can you see these huge fruits? So these are big and heavy. So scientists think that cauliflowery is an adaptation to support these large fruits, and you cannot actually see this phenomenon outside of the tropical rainforests. Okay, so this is a scene of the interior rainforest, and do you see anything unique in this picture? What is it actually? There's a tree, there's a big tree, or maybe two trees, but everything's covered with other little plants. And as you can see, all of these big tree trunks are covered with other small plants, and these nest-like plants are bromeliads, and there's a bunch of other stuff here. Lots of plants covering all the branches and trunks. And we call these epiphytes. So basically, epiphyte is a plant that live on another plant, and typically they are not parasitic. So when they are colonizing these tree branches, they trap organic matter between their roots, and eventually it will make a thin layer of soil, and we call it epiphyte mat. So once there's a thin layer of soil, it will attract more epiphytes. So eventually these tree trunks will be loaded with epiphytes. Examples for epiphytes are lichens, mosses. In this picture you can see a bunch of ferns and beautiful orchids. And one unique plant that we will see in the rainforest is bromeliads, those nest-like plants. And in bromelia, you will actually find a little pool of water in the middle of the plant, and it actually makes a small ecosystem. So as you can see in this picture, in the middle of the plant, there's a little pool, and these pools actually supports algae, bacteria, lots of larval insects, including mosquitoes, and amphibians. So it actually acts as an independent ecosystem. So there's tons of little ecosystems on top of these uh, huge branches of tropical trees. In some cases, uh, we can actually see some obligatory relationships between these bromeliad pools and some amphibians such as golden frog. So why don't we actually watch this short video so you can actually see actually how it works. So in this picture, before we actually see the video, you can see there's a tadpole and there's a bunch of insect larvae, and let's have a better look.
Caeta Falls is located on the Patara River in the heart of Guyana. It is surrounded by one of the largest and most biologically diverse rainforests in the world. This rainforest contains millions of microhabitats. Some of these microhabitats are found inside phytotelmata, water bodies that are held by plants. Bromeliads are perhaps the best-known plants that form phytotelmata. Their leaves form tanks that fill with rainwater, providing microhabitat for algae, mosses, and an array of small animals. The giant bromeliad that grows in the wet, misty microclimate around the falls is home to many species, including the golden frog. This tiny amphibian lives its entire life in and around these water bodies. It eats, hides, and breeds in these highly specialized environments. Although related species are found throughout much of South America, the golden frog is endemic to the bromeliads in the Caeta Falls vicinity. If the rainforest around the Caeta Falls disappears, the golden frog may become extinct. Luckily, Caeta Falls is protected as a national park in Guyana.
So what do you think? So the golden frog cannot survive without these bromeliad pools. So it's an obligatory relationship. Okay, so let's see whether you can actually recognize this guy. Anyone? So he actually invented a new highway system to travel inside rainforests thanks to these, right? So what are these? These are vine-like plants, one of the unique characteristics of rainforests. These plants actually use other plants to support themselves. One of the special category of these vine-like plants are lianas, and they have a woody structure, so they can actually support themselves a little better. And if you really experience a rainforest, you will realize that everything's interconnected by these vine-like plants. And in some locations, the biomass of the canopy is mainly, like half of it is due to these vine-like plants, and in some other cases the understory is heavily connected with these vine-like plants too. One unique vine-like plant is stranglerfig, and we will actually see some of these when we are in Amazon. And these figs actually start their life as a vine, but eventually it'll kill the host plant and it'll become a giant tree. So in this picture you can see this network of roots represents the growing stranglerfig around the host plant. So in several stages it'll engulf the entire host plant and kill it, and eventually it'll have the strength to support itself. So at the very end of the cycle, you can actually identify a strangler fig tree. So let's watch this short video to actually understand the process.
But some of these squatters can become murderers. A young fig tree like this may arrive here as a seed carried by a bird. At first, it grows quite slowly. As it gains in strength, its roots crawl downwards over its landlord's branches. Some dangle free, but keep on growing. Eventually, they reach the ground. Now, supplied with nutrients from the soil, the fig grows really fast. The rootlets wrapped around the main trunk thicken and fuse into a lattice. The host tree's fate is now sealed, for it is in the clutches of a strangler fig. As years pass, the fig thickens its roots, embracing the trunk ever more completely. Trees grow by increasing their girth. For the host tree, that is now impossible. But growth is difficult anyway, because the fig has a huge crown in the canopy that cuts off sunshine from its host, and its roots in the ground are stealing most of the soil's nutrients. Eventually, the host tree is killed, and its trunk rots away. But the fig does not fall. Its roots now form a hollow cylinder that is quite capable of standing upright by itself. This strangler is about 300 years old. In fact, it may be misleading to refer to it as a single tree. It's probable that 300 years ago there were several young figs up in the canopy. Now, centuries later, their roots have grown down to the ground. They've got rid of the body of their victim, and they're clinging to one another in this extraordinary interlace of pillars and buttresses in order to maintain their dominance of this part of the forest. Nor are these monsters always satisfied with just one victim. This 500-year-old, having strangled its first victim and lost its support, topples sideways into a second, killed that, and then a third, and now its roots are ready to embrace a fourth. Dead tree trunks are not wasted.
I'm really sorry about the quality of that video, but I think you've heard it and you have seen some of the process. So it's one of the strangest trees, and it starts as an epiphyte, but eventually it'll become a parasite, killing the host plant. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the forest gaps. And basically, local areas of natural disturbance are called gaps. So in the rainforest, you may actually identify some gaps. So fallen dead trees and sometimes storm damaged areas and insect damaged areas, and sometimes even people clear parts of the forest. So these are gaps, and the conditions in a gap is strikingly different compared to the intact forest. So these change conditions actually allow new species to colonize. So essentially this disturbance promotes the high species diversity of the rainforest, and we call this intermediate disturbance hypothesis. So more on intermediate disturbance hypothesis. So in this graph, the x-axis is the degree of disturbance or the intensity, and the y-axis is the number of taxa. So if the disturbance is very, very low and you don't find very many species, and again if the disturbance is very severe, again very few species, but you will find the most species in between under moderate levels of disturbances. So how it works? So let's start from the extreme end. When there's extreme disturbances, there's less species. So let's think about a volcanic eruption. Basically, it wipes out everything, right? So only a very few species will survive. In the other end, let's think about a very stable environment. And if the environment is very stable, typically one or a few species will dominate the habitat. So that will actually reduce the diversity. Other species will be eliminated. Only the dominant species will survive. But some degree of disturbance actually eliminates some of those dominant species and allow other species to colonize this newly open habitat. So that's why we actually get this pattern, and it's true for some tropical rainforests and it's true for intertidal mudflats, and there's a lot of empirical support for this intermediate disturbance hypothesis. Okay, so once there's a disturbance, immediately after disturbance, a succession starts. So basically, succession is the changes in a community following a disturbance. So in rainforest, a disturbed area has lots of sunlight, but at the same time, it's exposed to heavy rain, so the leaching is more heavier, so there's very less nutrients. So only species that can handle very poor nutritional conditions at the same time, which are adapted to utilize all the sunlight available, will survive. So Cecropia is one of the plant groups that we may see. I think we are going to be seeing it. It's something widespread, and it's one of the early successional species in rainforest, and sometimes we call them pioneering species. And they have adaptations to absorb all the available sunlight, large broad leaves, and they have high growth rates, so they can grow really fast. So within like several weeks it can reach to up to about 2 meters, and then it'll change the condition of that patch, and the changing environmental conditions will actually promote other species, less tolerant species, to invade this patch, and eventually after many generations, many years, it'll be a part of the rainforest. And these forest gaps actually attract very unique communities, including sloths, birds, insects, because it's an open gap. There's altered resource availability, so there's going to be some species utilizing those altered nutritional regimes, and always the predatory species tend to be in these gap areas. Okay, so with that, thank you very much, and we'll explore more about this with the other lecture.